Get Smart, How to Think and Act Like the Most Successful and Highest Paid People in Every Field by Brian Tracy. Picture a 24-year-old guy, completely broke, with no real skills to speak of, crashing on the floor of his friend's cramped one-room apartment. His days? Walking door to door trying to sell things, barely making any money, with rejection after rejection piling up. The future looked pretty bleak. Actually, it wasn't just dim, it was more like staring at a brick wall in complete darkness. Then one day, while rummaging through an old dresser in that tiny apartment, he stumbled upon a beat-up, used book. As he flipped through its worn pages, one sentence practically jumped off the page at him. It was almost embarrassingly simple. If you want to be successful, you have to have goals. A few pages later, the book suggested something concrete. Grab a piece of paper and write down 10 things you want to accomplish. He figured, why not? What did he have to lose? So he found a scrap of paper, scribbled down 10 goals, folded it up, and then promptly lost it somewhere. But here's the thing. Something had shifted. It was like flipping a light switch in a dark room. 30 days later, his entire world had changed. He discovered a new sales technique that tripled his income practically overnight. He moved into his own place, got promoted to sales manager, started training other people. Everything was different, and it all happened within a single month of writing that list. That broke young man sleeping on someone's floor was Brian Tracy, and that moment became the launching pad for one of the most influential careers in personal development. He went on to study success obsessively, creating programs that millions of people around the world have used. And whenever someone comes up to him now and says, "You changed my life, you made me rich," he always asks them the same thing: what specifically made the difference? And the answer is always the same: learning how to set and achieve goals. That's what we're diving into today with his book, Get Smart. This isn't just a collection of helpful tips. It's more like a complete rewiring manual for your brain. Tracy makes a bold claim: the quality of your thinking determines the quality of your life. And here's the kicker. The most successful, highest-paid people in every field don't necessarily work harder than everyone else. They think differently. They're running different software in their minds. So what is that software? By the time we're done here, you'll understand the 10 fundamental thinking shifts that separate high achievers from everyone else. And this isn't about being born a genius or having some natural talent. It's about learning the mental models, the inner frameworks that you can install in your own mind, starting today, to change not just what you do, but who you become. Let's start with a question that might sound a bit unusual. What do you think is the single greatest discovery in all of human history? Fire? The wheel? Maybe the internet? According to Brian Tracy, it's something far more personal and far more powerful. The greatest discovery is this: you become what you think about, most of the time. Let that sit with you for a second. Your thoughts aren't just passive background noise. They're active, creative forces. They're literally the architects of your reality. Your inner world of thought directly creates your outer world of experience. Shakespeare put it beautifully: there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. This is the foundation for everything else. Most people go through life with their thoughts on autopilot. They react to traffic, to the news, to whatever someone else says. Their mind is like a ship without a rudder, just getting tossed around by whatever waves come along. But high achievers? They understand their mind isn't a passenger ship. It's a battleship, and they're the captain. They deliberately choose what to think about. Your brain, as Tracy describes it, is this extraordinary supercomputer. It has 100 billion brain cells, and each one connects to as many as 20,000 other cells. A brain expert named Tony Bazan actually calculated that the number of potential ideas you can generate is literally the number 1 followed by 8 full pages of zeros. That's more potential thoughts than all the molecules in the known universe. And yet, Most people use only about 2% of this incredible power. They're sitting on a mental bank account with millions in it, but they only ever access a few $100 because they don't know the combination to the vault. So what is that combination? Tracy argues it begins with one crucial shift, from short-term thinking to long-term thinking. Back in the 1950s, a researcher at Harvard named Dr. Edward Banfield spent nearly 50 years studying what causes some people to move up economically while others stay stuck. He wanted to understand why some families could start with nothing and become wealthy in just one generation. After studying thousands of people, he found the answer wasn't education, background, or even intelligence. It was one single factor: time perspective. Banfield discovered that the most successful people are intensely future-oriented. They think about where they want to be 5, 10, even 20 years from now, and they make their daily decisions based on that long-term vision. Just the act of thinking long-term forces you to make better decisions in the short term. People with a short-term perspective, on the other hand, only think about the immediate moment. They chase instant gratification. They want the pleasure now and figure they'll deal with the pain later. The young person who drops out of school to get a job and buy a car? That's short-term thinking. The immediate rewards feel great and exciting, but the long-term consequence is often a lifetime of limited earnings and unfulfilled potential. Successful people flip this around. They're willing to make sacrifices now to enjoy greater rewards later. They understand the principle of short-term pain for long-term gain. This is the essence of what Tracy calls rich thinking versus poor thinking. Rich thinkers delay gratification. They save and invest 10 to 15% of their income throughout their lives, even when it's tough. They understand what Einstein called the most powerful force in the universe: compound interest. Investing just $100 a month from age 21 to 65 can grow to over $1 million. Meanwhile, poor thinkers spend everything they earn, and often more. They live paycheck to paycheck, complaining about having, quote, too much month at the end of the money. So how do you develop this long-term perspective? Tracy offers a powerful mental exercise he calls back from the future thinking. Imagine you could wave a magic wand and your life is absolutely perfect 5 years from now. What does it look like? Be specific. How much are you earning? What kind of work are you doing? What does your health look like? What about your relationships and family life? Peter Drucker, the great management thinker, once said something fascinating. People often overestimate what they can accomplish in 1 year, but they greatly underestimate what they could accomplish in 5 years. Once you have that crystal clear picture of your ideal future, you work backward to today and ask yourself, what would I have to start doing right now to make that future a reality? You don't need to see every step of the staircase to start climbing. You just need to see the first step, and when you take that first step, the second one appears. This is the essence of goal-oriented thinking versus reaction-oriented thinking. Most people live in reactive mode. The alarm goes off, and they immediately start reacting to their environment: emails, phone calls, other people's demands. They're constantly putting out fires, never actually building anything. They don't know where they're going, so as the saying goes, any road will take them there. Goal-oriented people are different. They know exactly where they're headed. As Tracy says, success is goals, and all else is commentary. Only about 3% of adults have clear, specific, written goals. The other 97% have wishes and dreams, and they don't know the difference. And here's the staggering part. That top 3% will earn and achieve, on average, 10 times more than the other 97% combined. Why are written goals so powerful? Because when you write a goal down, you take it out of the realm of fantasy and make it tangible. You program it into your subconscious mind, which then goes to work 24 hours a day to make it reality. Your mind becomes like a heat-seeking missile, constantly making course corrections until you hit your target. But just having a goal isn't enough. The quality of your thinking on the way to that goal is what separates success from failure. This brings us to another crucial distinction: slow thinking versus fast thinking. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel laureate, wrote a groundbreaking book on this very topic. Fast thinking is intuitive, automatic, instinctive. It's what you use when you're driving in traffic or having a casual conversation. For most daily life stuff, it works fine. Slow thinking, on the other hand, is deliberate, logical, and requires real effort. It's deep analytical work. Now here's the key insight. Kahneman found that the biggest mistake people make is using fast thinking for decisions that actually require slow thinking. Decisions about your career, who you marry, how you invest your money, these aren't things to decide on a whim. They have long-term consequences, and they demand that you slow down, gather the facts, and think things through carefully. Thomas Edison once said, "Thinking is the hardest work of all, which is why most people avoid it at all costs." Good thinking is hard work. It requires discipline, but it's a discipline you can learn. One of the most powerful ways to force yourself to think slowly is to think on paper. When you write down every detail of a problem or a decision, something magical happens between your head and your hand. You're forced to be meticulous. Francis Bacon wrote, "Writing maketh an exact man." Another powerful technique? Simply buy yourself time. When someone pressures you for an important decision, use these magic words. "Let me think about it and get back to you." Peter Drucker famously said that fast people decisions are invariably wrong people decisions. The best managers practice a version of the 30-day rule. No matter how perfect a candidate seems, they wait 30 days before making a final decision. During that time, flaws and weaknesses that were invisible at first often reveal themselves. But how do you make sure your slow thinking is actually good thinking? This leads to our next contrast: informed thinking versus uninformed thinking. Harold Janine, the man who built the massive conglomerate ITT, had a simple motto: facts don't lie. He said, get the real facts, not the obvious facts, or assumed facts, or hoped-for facts. Get the real facts. The biggest mistakes we make in life and business come from acting without doing our homework. We fall in love with an idea and then suffer from what's called confirmation bias. We only look for information that confirms what we already want to believe, and we ignore everything else. The truly smart thinker does the opposite. They use the scientific method. They form a hypothesis, an idea, and then they actively try to disprove it. They ask the brutal questions. Is there really a market for this? What's the worst possible thing that could happen if we move forward? J. Paul Getty, once the richest man in the world, said his secret was identifying the worst possible outcome of any venture and then working relentlessly to make sure that worst-case scenario never happened. This is where experience becomes so valuable. Experienced thinkers develop something called pattern recognition. A chess grandmaster can glance at a board and instantly see up to 50,000 possible combinations. They're not necessarily smarter, but they've seen more patterns from thousands of hours of practice. The CEO of a Fortune 500 company earning over $10 million a year isn't paid that much because they work harder. It's because their years of experience allow them to quickly recognize complex situations and make accurate decisions that can be worth billions. But you don't have to wait 30 years to gain that wisdom. You can borrow it. Seek advice from experts, do your research, and never, ever assume. Always ask, how do we know this is true? Now, even with the best information and the most careful thought, your success ultimately comes down to what you actually do. And this brings us to the difference between result-oriented thinking and activity-oriented thinking. Many people confuse activity with accomplishment. They're busy all day long, answering emails, attending meetings, making phone calls. They're definitely active. But at the end of the day, they haven't actually produced any meaningful results. Tracy puts it bluntly, your most valuable financial asset is your earning ability. And your earning ability is simply your ability to get results that people will pay you for. It's not about putting in the time. It's about task completion. The work world is governed by the 80-20 rule. 20% of your activities will account for 80% of your results. The top performers, the ones on the fast track, are obsessed with identifying that critical 20% and focusing their energy there. The other 80% of people? They're time servers. They show up, do just enough not to get fired, and waste, on average, 50% of their working time on idle chatter and electronic distractions. If you want to join the top 20%, you've got to adopt a simple but powerful rule. Work all the time you work. When you're at work, work. Start a little earlier. Stay a little later. Pick up the pace. Your personal mantra should be, back to work, back to work, back to work. To do this effectively, you need a system. The most powerful time management tool ever invented is a simple list. Plan your day the night before. When you do this, your subconscious mind works on your plan all night long, and you often wake up with ideas and insights to get your tasks done faster. Once you have your list, you've got to set priorities. Tracy recommends the ABCDE method. An A task is a must-do, something with serious consequences if you don't do it. A B task is a should-do. It has mild consequences. A C task is nice to do, like grabbing coffee with a coworker, with basically no consequences at all. A D task is for delegate. Give it to someone else. And an E task is for eliminate. Just stop doing it altogether. The rule is simple but life-changing. Never do a B task when you have an A task left undone. And you always start your day by working on your A1 task, your single most important priority, and you stay with it until it's 100% complete. This habit of starting and finishing your most important task first thing in the morning floods your brain with endorphins, nature's happy drug. It gives you a feeling of power and momentum that carries you through the entire day. But what happens when the path forward gets blocked, when your plans hit a wall? This is where flexible thinking becomes your greatest asset, as opposed to rigid thinking. In times of rapid change, as Tracy notes, the answers have changed. What worked last year or even last month might be completely obsolete today. Think about companies like BlackBerry. They dominated the business cell phone market, but when the iPhone came out, they rigidly dismissed it as a toy. Within 5 years, their market share plummeted from 49% to less than 0.5%. They failed to adapt. Their thinking was rigid. Flexible thinkers, on the other hand, are constantly challenging their own assumptions. They practice what Tracy calls zero-based thinking. This is one of the most powerful mental tools you can ever learn. It's a single question you can apply to every area of your life. Knowing what I now know, is there anything I'm doing today that I wouldn't get into again if I had to do it over? Is there a job you wouldn't take again? An investment you wouldn't make? A relationship you wouldn't start? How do you know if you're in a zero-based thinking situation? The answer is stress. If something is causing you chronic stress, worry, and frustration, it's a giant red flag that it's something you wouldn't get into again today. Admitting you were wrong isn't a sign of weakness. It's a mark of courage and strength. The superior executive is always willing to say 3 things. I was wrong, I made a mistake, and I've changed my mind. The sooner you can cut your losses on a bad decision, the sooner you can redeploy your time, money, and emotion into something that actually has a future. This kind of flexibility is a hallmark of creative thinking versus mechanical thinking. Mechanical thinkers see the world in black and white, right or wrong. They suffer from what Tracy calls psychosclerosis, a hardening of the attitudes. Creative thinkers, however, are constantly asking why and why not and what if. They approach problems with an open, childlike curiosity. One of the most powerful creative thinking tools is the principle of constraints. This principle states that between you and any goal, there's always one primary bottleneck or limiting factor that determines how fast you achieve it. Your job is to accurately identify that constraint and then focus all your creative energy on removing it. For example, if your goal is to double your sales, ask yourself, why aren't my sales already double? The answer that immediately pops into your head is likely your biggest constraint. Is it a lack of leads? A weak closing process? Not enough hours in the day? The 80-20 rule applies here too. 80% of your constraints are usually internal, within yourself or your company, not external. Superior thinkers always look within first. Of course, all these ways of thinking, long-term, slow, informed, results-oriented, flexible, and creative, are powered by one final, overarching mental state: positive thinking versus negative thinking. Aristotle concluded that the ultimate goal of all human action is to achieve happiness. And the biggest obstacle standing between you and happiness? Negative emotions. Tracy's research led him to a profound breakthrough. It's impossible to experience a negative emotion without blaming someone or something else for your situation. Blame is the trunk of the negative emotion tree. So how do you cut down the tree? You do it with one of the most powerful tools for mental control ever discovered: accepting 100% responsibility for your life. The moment you stop blaming, your negative emotions disappear. You can't accept responsibility and blame someone else at the same time. The two thoughts are mutually exclusive. So whenever you feel yourself getting angry or frustrated, you can short-circuit the entire negative spiral by simply saying these magic words: I am responsible. When you say I am responsible, you're not saying you're at fault. You're simply saying that you're in charge of your response. You take back control of your emotional life. You move from being a victim to being a creator. A critical part of this process is forgiveness. Many people are held hostage by their past, carrying around anger and resentment for years toward people who have long forgotten about them. Forgiveness isn't for the other person. It's a perfectly selfish act. When you forgive, you don't release the prisoner. You release yourself. You've got to forgive your parents for their mistakes, forgive others who have hurt you, and most importantly, forgive yourself for every foolish thing you've ever done. You have to let the past go so you can turn toward the future. And that's the final synthesis. Becoming a smart thinker isn't about mastering one trick. It's about integrating all these principles into a new way of being. It's about becoming intensely future-oriented and goal-focused. It's about thinking slowly and gathering the facts before making big decisions. It's about being obsessed with results, not just activity. It's about being flexible enough to admit when you're wrong, and creative enough to find a better way. And it's about powering it all with a positive, responsible attitude. This is the mental operating system of the most successful people in every field. And the best part? It's not something you're born with. It's something you can learn. As we step back and look at the landscape of ideas in Get Smart, what really strikes me isn't their complexity. It's their profound simplicity. In a world that constantly sells us complicated hacks and secrets, Brian Tracy brings us back to the timeless fundamentals. His message is incredibly grounding. Success isn't an accident. It's a predictable result of thinking and acting in specific, disciplined ways. The most powerful lesson, especially if you're just starting out in life, is the idea that your mind is the one thing in the universe over which you have complete control, and that's all you really need. You don't need a wealthy family, a fancy degree, or a lucky break. You need to take command of your own thinking. The idea that you become what you think about most of the time isn't just some motivational platitude. It's a law of nature, as real as gravity. Tracy gives you the user's manual for that law. What makes this book so practical is that it moves beyond just thinking positively and gives you concrete mental models to actually apply. The concept of zero-based thinking, for instance, is legitimately life-changing. How many of us continue down a path, in a career, a project, or a relationship, simply because of the time we've already invested, even when we know in our hearts it's wrong? Tracy gives us permission to cut our losses, to say, I made a mistake, and to pivot toward a better future. That's not failure. That's wisdom in action. So how can you start applying these powerful ideas right now, today? Let's not make it complicated. Here are 3 simple actions you can take. First, do the 10-goal exercise. Tonight, before you go to sleep, grab a clean sheet of paper, write today's date at the top, and then write down 10 goals you'd like to accomplish in the next 12 months. Write them in the present tense, as if you've already achieved them. I earn, I weigh, I am. Then review the list and ask yourself, which one goal, if I achieved it, would have the greatest positive impact on my life? Circle it. That's now your major definite purpose. Think about it every single day. Second, for the next 7 days, make this question your constant companion. What is the most valuable use of my time right now? Before you check social media, before you start a task, before you say yes to someone's request, just pause and ask yourself that question. This simple habit will automatically begin shifting your focus from low-value activities to high-value results. And third, practice the I am responsible mantra. The next time you feel angry, frustrated, or find yourself blaming someone for a problem, stop. Take a deep breath and say to yourself, I am responsible. Notice how that simple phrase shifts your focus away from the problem and onto the solution. It puts you back in the driver's seat of your own life. That was a deep dive into Get Smart by Brian Tracy. We've covered the core principles today, but I want to be honest with you. A summary, no matter how detailed, is like looking at a photograph of a magnificent feast. You can see what's on the table, but you can't taste the food. The real magic happens when you read the book for yourself. It's in those quiet moments when a particular story or a simple turn of phrase resonates with you in a way you didn't expect. This summary is designed to give you a map of the territory, to help you decide if this journey is one you want to take. If anything we've talked about today has sparked a fire in you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about gaining information. It's an experience that can genuinely reshape the way you see yourself and the world around you. You can find a link to the book in the description below. And finally, if you found this summary valuable, if it gave you a new idea or a fresh perspective, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next exploration into another life-changing book from the Billionaire's Bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.